Hey everyone, I'm Travis and this is Abby. Welcome to Concussion, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of brain trauma, breakthrough treatments, and inspiring recovery stories. Let's get into it.
So last week, we talked about your first memories after waking up, not realizing anything was off at first. And a nurse said, you'll have to get used to the new normal, which you didn't really put much thought into because you still felt normal. But eventually that phrase became infuriating to you. Because over time, it became really clear. Things were not normal. Things were more disrupted than you had realized. And concussions are on a continuum. Some are better, some are worse. Yours was worse than you realized. So let's talk about that. When was the first time you noticed something had changed?
Well, it's a strange thing. When something so drastic happens, you'd think you'd notice right away. But when someone has a brain injury, the sense of self melds with the injury. So it's like unrecognizable. It's kind of like when Marty skews into the alternate timeline in Back to the Future. My perspective being the ones who lived in a timeline where everything was normal. Biff was the luckiest guy in the world. But to Marty, my family, everything was different and they knew it. Something was off.
And let me reiterate to everyone. Travis was in a nursing home, or what's called a subacute rehab, mostly surrounded by folks that are much older and can't tolerate doing a lot of work. In a subacute rehab or a nursing home setting, someone is expected to do 1 to 2 hours worth of therapy a day. The alternative is what's called an acute rehab, where someone is expected to endure 4 to 5 hours worth of work a day. And acute rehabs can have specialties, like brain injuries or spinal cord injuries. And for someone like you, Travis, you ran 5Ks, you had high adrenaline hobbies, you worked full time, and then when you had an accident, you would benefit from the more intense 4 to 5 hours a day worth of work to get better as quickly as possible and with a more appropriate level of intervention. A lot of times, people who are in charge of saving money are also in charge of someone's care. They dictate these options of acute rehab versus subacute from behind desks, and they have no business determining the appropriate medical care for patients. But we can get into the realities of insurance dictated care another time. But the paradox here is that if the insurance companies would listen to the doctors and therapists who have eyes on the person and the experience to make these decisions, they would save much more money in the long run because the proper care would have been administered right the first time, allowing for a faster and more comprehensive recovery.
Yeah, you're 100% right about that. Like, had I been in a brain rehabilitation center, I feel like I would have fared, way better. I have so many unanswered questions. Now, don't get me wrong. I didn't really care where they sent me. I was ready to get out of that hospital. If they were just, wherever they sent me, I would have went. I just wanted to stop getting poked with needles and stop having nurses come in and check on me every 2 seconds. Didn't matter where I went. So I guess that's a good recognition of being, you or your family being your own health advocate and ensuring you get into the right place.
So what did your rehab actually look like?
Well, it was 1 hour a day. That's it. And the rest was, I was just sitting in bed. I had my cell phone, so I would, flip through Facebook or whatever. But mostly just listening to nurses walk by the door, and they would come in and give me my medicine. And like I said, 1 hour of PT a day.
And your physical therapy, was it tailored for someone who had a brain injury?
No, I don't think so. Just generic gym exercises, like lat pull downs. It was lifting 5 pounds 5 pounds above my head. Just things like that.
So instead of a brain rehab, it was more general strengthening exercises. And strengthening is great, especially after you've been in a bed for 4 weeks, but it certainly could have been more specific to your injury. Do you remember doing things like just for the sake of doing them in your therapy sessions and thinking like, when in the heck am I ever going to need to do this?
So I don't remember anything too specific like that, but I do remember my wife saying something about playing checkers, standing up, or something that certainly didn't correlate with what I did normally. Like it was more like joining the crowd who watches the Price is Right, just like older people stuff.
And for a quick clinical sidebar, for the therapists that are in that setting, they are mostly working with folks that are retired and have a little bit more sedentary or lower demand lifestyle. And I've worked in a rehab setting like that. I know what it's like to get into the routine of having people do the same things to accomplish something that we on the clinical side think is important, and we defend it as functional. And we just get so automated that we eventually find ourselves doing the same things with everyone because it's easy for us to explain as functional to an insurance company. So in some ways, I understand why they may have had you do remedial things to take up an hour worth of therapy, but a therapist I work with left a lasting impression on me that's worth sharing. So for this example, the intention was to get a person who had something going on with their brain more steady on their feet. He was in his late 60s, early 70s, so still could be very active. I would have him stand on a foam cushion and do various reaching to targets to challenge his balance. And this therapist suggested to me, why not have him go wash a car? And it kind of stopped my automated brain circuit of doing the same thing to accomplish something that I thought was important. So washing a car involves that same dynamic balance with reaching, standing tolerance, the cognitive load of figuring out what you need to do to get the task done, getting it all prepared, lots of bending and twisting, and I could be with him to keep him safe. So instead of me putting together an hour's worth of individual activities to work on all those things in isolation, like balance, standing endurance, functional reach, bending, twisting, motor planning, cognitive challenges, I could just put that all together into one thing that he might actually want to do, and something he might associate with, I'm getting better because I can do this. He certainly wouldn't think I'm getting better because I can stand on a cushion and reach out 30 times. The part that stuck with me in this is that this is something that would make a person feel like he's accomplishing something. He's doing something to contribute to himself or to his family, and something he might actually do in real life when we're finished with the rehab phase. If I want this person to start feeling like himself again, I need to give him the opportunity to identify with who he was before he got hurt. He was someone who did things to help out his family. He did things that had a tangible outcome. And this was something that would make him feel like himself. And we talked a lot last time about how that sense of identity gets shaken after you're injured. Things like this go a long way to help a patient see themselves as who they were before they got injured.
So basically, giving them a purpose that coincides with their real life.
Exactly.
Well, I can say, like, I wasn't going to wash a car, though. I don't think I don't think I did that prior to my accident. We're definitely like the let's go to the automated car wash type people.
Okay. So good rehab isn't just about exercise. It's about rebuilding your life. If someone loved working on cars before they got injured, have them go change an air filter. If they were a parent, have them unload the dishwasher. Both of those things can accomplish what we need on the clinical side. They just mean something to the person. So you get to give them something that matters. We're trained on the clinical side to make the intervention we come up with fit our goals. But this therapist that left an impression on me, her name's Paula, she's a phenomenal therapist. She left me with an example of how we need to make our interventions fit into their picture of who they are so that our goals can matter.
Yeah, no washing cars for me. We'll go to the automated car wash.
All right. So, well, how did you spend your time with your therapist?
1 hour per day. One therapist one day, the other the next. It was on a rotation. And now that I think about it, I see what you mean about it needs to fit your actual experience. In my life, after being in the nursing home for a little while, they started letting me leave Saturday morning. But when I got home and I tried to walk up my driveway, I noticed that all the muscles in my legs started to hurt. I could not walk up the hill to my house when with my feet at an angle because apparently there is a lot of other muscles and tendons engaged when you're walking up a hill versus walking flat. And that's something that, we didn't really notice. But when I got back to the nursing home, I finally did get up to my house. What I did was, I took the long way around, but I thought for a second I was going to have to crawl. Like, that's how bad it hurt. Like, I was walking flat fine, but just engaging those different muscles was a whole new ball game. And when I got back, we let the patient or we let the therapist know, and she looks out the window and she says, "Oh, well, look, there's a hill there. We'll start there tomorrow." And that's what we did.
So, that's a great example of how they were able to make something much more specific to the demands you'd encounter. I think you probably had physical therapy one day and then occupational therapy the following day if it was only 1 hour per day. And it sounds like the physical therapy did lower body strengthening and walking, and the occupational therapy did upper body strengthening. Now, did anything in your day or your rehab activities feel like it was meant to address your head? Like concentration, multitasking, anything that was more cognitive in nature?
No, nothing that I can remember. Like I said, I played some solitaire on my phone, and I think I downloaded like Luminosity or something. But as far as cognitive tests they would give me, the most I can remember is like when they were talking to me, they would give me a number. They'd say, "Okay, Travis, I want you to remember 37." And then they would continue talking. And then a couple minutes later, they say, "Hey, what was that number I asked you?" And but that was it.
Now, what if there were more ways to keep your brain engaged during your downtime? So, activities that would challenge your focus or your memory, but didn't require supervision of a therapist.
Like, no, like playing chess on my phone or doing something on my phone or a tablet, but like no balance beam stuff where I needed somebody to kind of guide me.
Exactly. Nothing that would put your safety at risk. But with only an hour or two of rehab each day, having access to simple tools like apps on your phone or reaction time training light pads that you could do while you're sitting could help stimulate recovery. Recognizing and addressing brain injuries early lead to a much better long-term outcome.
Yeah, for sure. Plus, nowadays, kids will always have a phone. They don't even know what it's like not to have one. I wonder if that'll play a role in how brain rehabilitation works.
There's a big stigma about no screens after a concussion, and there's a time and a place for that, but you make a good point. Kids these days get a lot of social interaction, concentration, and recall exposure when they're on their devices. But I think you and I are the last of the generations that consistently played outside as kids.
There wasn't a day I wasn't outside before my accident. I love adventure, and all my hobbies are outside. I work outside. I know in the hospital that I just couldn't go outside, but I wish I could have. Being inside too long just isn't good for anybody.
Yeah, that's a good point. Even just for the simple benefits of aiding in depression, being outside is really important. They may not have had the staff available to get you outside and supervise you while you're out there to make sure that you're safe, but that's something for all of us on the clinical side to keep in mind. Get people outside of those four walls whenever possible, especially if there's someone who loved being outside.
Yeah, the only time I would go outside is if my family took me.
And last week, you gave the example of when your mom was able to take you to Ruby Tuesdays and what a shock to your system that was. But what other experiences do you remember when you were able to leave the rehab to be outside?
So when I was able to leave, the only thing that I really remember was my little brother taking me to get a haircut. That's about the extent of it. Nothing, no big adventures.
And then eventually, you could do an overnight at home on the weekend. What was that like for your family? Did they feel ready to manage whatever you needed at home?
Oh yeah, they had the best of times, and it was just everything was perfect, and it was like I never left.
I have a feeling that's a little sarcastic.
Oh yeah, for sure. In honesty, I can imagine it came with a bit of uncertainty, even unfamiliarity, because they had been in the role of driving to the hospital and watching me under the guide of medical professionals, and I'm sure they got used to that role. And so I imagine they were overwhelmed and irritated and relieved and all the emotions, all of them is what they've all of them. Yeah.
Like, happy to have you home, but then panicked of like, oh crap, now I'm the one that's responsible for him.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, they had the pressure of being the ones to keep you safe that up until that point was the job of a skilled professional, someone who went to school for this. And that's an intimidating task to take on. I remember your wife telling me that you thought you could just take a shower on your own, but she felt stressed about how do I help him if he slips or if something happens to him.
I don't remember her saying like specifically about the shower. I couldn't get a shower. She probably did. I do remember her saying that I couldn't shave because she was sure I would slice my neck open. And I think a doctor put that in her head. But anyway, we compromised. I didn't shave, but I certainly did get a shower.
I could certainly imagine that if you're away from home, even just for like a simple medical procedure and you're in the hospital for a couple nights, or even like when you're away on vacation, once you get home and you take a shower in your shower, nothing makes you feel more brand new than that first shower at home.
Best shower I've ever had. Best shower.
Now, you said earlier that you still felt normal. And looking back now, do you think you were acting normal? So, for instance, let's go back to that story you told me about McDonald's when you were expecting a feast and your mom brought you a 4-piece McNugget. That moment crushed you.
Yeah, and I never thought I was overreacting or over emotional about anything. Everything that happened seemed justified. And so I'll tell you the story about that. There was this time I was pretty hungry. And I had called my mom and I was like, "Hey mom, can you bring me McDonald's?" And looking back now, I probably should have reiterated like kind of how hungry I was because I was starving. And when my mom gets there, I'm expecting like double cheeseburger, 20-piece McNugget, large Coke, because there's something medicinal about McDonald's Coke. I don't know what it is, but like that's what I was expecting. And she brings me like a 4-piece McNugget and like a small fry or something. And I was infuriated. I was so mad because I was so hungry. And like, how could she do this to me? How could she do this? Does she not know what I'm feeling? Like how hungry I am? And I was 100% mad. And it's not, I didn't like yell at her or say anything to her, but I internalized that and I was furious.
Now, why do you think that specific thing hit you so hard?
I felt like she didn't care. Like she's just like, "Oh, whatever. I just got to take him this food." And she didn't take me into consideration whatsoever. Like I kind of thought maybe even she did it on purpose.
And did that make sense to you? Like, do you think that this had crossed your mom's thought process at all? Do you think she would expect you to have this kind of reaction at all?
Well, looking back now, like no way. And if I would have called my mom right now, she would go get me McDonald's and bring it to my house, like right now, even though I could just go drive because my mom is a great person. So, yeah, absolutely not. But in that moment, logic will not outweigh the emotions that you feel.
Now, I think you deserve some grace in this scenario because it seems to be a common theme. When folks are in the hospital or in a rehab setting, the food means so much to folks. To even having things that taste familiar or that they're looking forward to, they just have certain appetite expectations. And especially in your case, because you're on a medication that just drove your appetite through the roof, like nothing's going to satiate it. Plus, your brain didn't have that cool down setting to keep your response from getting out of hand.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I could not stop myself. And I found that happening more and more. But that is the first incident that I specifically remembered getting super mad.
And then it starts getting to a point where you're going home, not just for a weekend, but going home permanently. Were you nervous about going home?
Nope, not at all. I was so ready to be home. So ready.
And going home feels like a huge milestone, like a moment of celebration. Do you think that fear of being dependent made you push yourself too hard at times?
Probably, because I think looking at it, like being dependent on somebody else, that is probably the only thing that I'm worried about.
So, after months of a constant sensory storm, machines beeping, nurses talking, TVs buzzing, you finally find yourself in silence. The noise is gone, the people are gone, and it's just you. At the hospital, alone time was rare. Now, it's all you have while your family's at work and school. The initial euphoria of freedom fades pretty fast, and it's replaced with this stark solitude. And that shift, going from overstimulation to deprivation, can hit harder than you'd expect.
Yeah, but I could go to my refrigerator and do whatever I wanted. If I wanted to, drink soda at 12 o'clock at night, I didn't have to ask a nurse. I could just go and get it, and that was good enough for me. But things weren't quite the same as when I left. Like hallways were longer, and shadows were darker, much darker, and background noise was louder. Being home, that was when I started to realize things, especially me, may have changed.
What was the very first thing you did when you got home? Did it feel normal or did it feel weird?
Oh, I remember I had a chocolate ice cream cone with my dog sitting on my lap, and that felt like just right. I even have a picture of that.
So, recovery doesn't end when you walk out of the facility, but can feel like everyone thinks it does. Once you can walk, shower on your own, people assume you're fine. But with a brain injury, that's not the case. So we'll dive into what no one warned you about, what you weren't prepared for, and what you wish you had known next time. By having these conversations, we can bring awareness to the challenges that often go unnoticed just to help other people navigate them. Once you were home, did people still check on you? Or did they assume he's home now? He doesn't need doctors anymore, so he's fine.
Nope. It was like everyone forgot I existed. I was so used to seeing them every day, and I needed to see them now, too. Because the only different thing about the entire situation was that I was home. I still felt like I still felt not good. Like I was still injured, and I was very used to that family interaction.
If you could go back in time and give yourself advice the day you left the hospital, what would you say?
I'd look myself dead in the eye, and I'd say, look, dude, you don't know this, and you probably aren't going to believe me, but you just got through the easy part of recovery. This is where it gets real, so be prepared.
What's something you had to figure out on your own because no one told you?
Your own thoughts can be worse than anything that could ever happen to you.
Again, I appreciate your willingness to share this so openly. And out of that full spectrum of concussions that we talked about, people might not be able to have the exact same experience you did, but shades of the same experience may seem familiar to them. And this is a powerful way to realize that this might be due to the concussion, not something that's wrong with you. So look forward to talking about your next phase, and we'll dive into what you wish you had known and what could have made things a little bit easier for you.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Cool.
Sweet.
Awesome. See you guys.
Thanks again for tuning in to Concussion. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to follow us and share it with someone you may think will find it useful. You can catch us on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. For updates and behind-the-scenes content, check out our TikTok, Instagram, and X. Or join our growing community on Discord, where we dive deeper into concussion recovery and support each other along the way. All links are in the description, so see you there. And until next time, keep your head in the game and keep it protected.